Hello and welcome to the March, April and May update for Blue Sky Aces, a low poly World War I flight simulator currently under development. The last few months have been marked by a huge change in direction with the map building, which is really starting to pay dividends. So today I'm going to discuss the reasons for the change in approach and how the new system works, as well as a few other items of interest. In the last video I showed off a new approach to generating maps using a mix of real-world GIS mapping data and procedural generation. The primary driver for this was to allow for larger maps to be created, which was going to be too time consuming to do it manually like I'd done for the existing maps. Shortly after the last video I realised that this approach wasn't really going to save me time. Instead it would just change the type of work required from tedious and error-prone manual tasks to coding really complex systems for placing thousands of objects over vast areas in some kind of logical way. Procedural generation is one of those double-edged swords. In the right situation it can be the solution that allows for practically infinite replayability, but too often it just creates vast, empty and or nonsensical worlds that lack character. In this case it was threatening to fall into the latter, and be one of those all-consuming tasks that would chew up enormous amounts of time, while completely missing the goal of speeding up development. Yes, at some point it might make generating maps really fast, but getting there would be a marathon. The solution was to go back to what we already had and look at ways of speeding up the process rather than completely replacing it. In the past, maps were built by combining hand-modelled terrain tiles and a simple grid pattern. Initially these were 5 km square tiles, later reduced to 1 km square for more control and greater variability. This approach was relatively quick at small scale, but it became much more time consuming as the maps grew. Other details like trees, roads and towns were all created by hand using a number of tools designed to speed up the process. This provided a lot of flexibility, but it was also extremely time consuming and required a lot of playtesting to identify and fix any mistakes. This style of terrain building is for all intents and purposes a tile map, which is a technique usually associated with 2D games to create environments from tileable sprites. The only real difference here is that I'm generating 3D models instead of sprites. The solution therefore seems simple. Just create a tool for creating a 3D tile maps, which can be customized to work with the game's existing systems. Unity actually does have some tools for achieving this, however they're heavily aimed at 2D games, and I felt that it was going to be harder to adapt them to my needs than it was worth. Now just painting simple tiles is actually a pretty poor approach, as it's really slow and the tile maps generally look really blocky, with lots of repeating patterns. The typical solution to this problem used by 2D games is to use something called a rule tile. So that's what we're going to do. A rule tile is effectively a collection of related tiles, where the rules define which tile is used based on the contents of the neighbouring tiles. One of the simplest examples is a water tile, where in the middle of the ocean a water tile is just a blue square, but near land it needs to include a section of coastline. The shape of the coastline varies depending on how many water tiles surround the tile. The power of the rule tile lies in the fact that you paint with a single tile and it automatically picks the best tile for you. This technique can work for all manner of map features from towns and cities, rivers and forests to roads and railways. Now while rule tiles are good, the repeating patterns will still show for some types of tiles. Another trick that 2D games use to solve this is to layer multiple tile maps of different resolutions. So that's what we're going to do. While the base terrain tiles are 1 km square, the detail tiles will only be 200 meters in size. In theory we can combine as many different layers of different sizes. However, there are some practical constraints and diminishing returns from having too many layers. Unlike the terrain tile map, the detail maps aren't solid, with many of the tiles being unoccupied. I'm going to use detail tiles for adding items such as forests, towns, roads, railway tracks, trenches, as well as many other features. There's one more special tile that I've created, which I'm calling a mosaic tile. This is a bunch of detailed tiles grouped together to create a larger tile of any size you like. When you paint with this tile brush, you're only painting the smaller detailed tiles. However, which tile is placed is based on the location on the map. This works really well to fill an area, as it ensures that the detailed tiles all fit together in a logical way, without any obvious seams or grid-like patterns. This works great for details like farm fields, as it allows me to fill in areas around other obstacles without looking like the same tile is being repeated everywhere. The map builder is now almost at the point where it's ready to be used to replace the existing demo maps, with one last big hurdle to overcome. However, it's likely to be a tricky one. At the moment, the roads and railway tracks that it generates looks really great. However, they're currently just for show. They don't have any of the metadata required for the vehicles to navigate them. This will be June's priority, with the goal of trying to get at least one replacement map out on the beta branch for testing by the end of June. In addition to the map editor, we've also been working on improving the handling of the aircraft and other minor improvements. This work is happening in preparation for a new demo update, which is planned for May. However, it's likely going to be June now, given that the month is rapidly coming to an end. The first big improvement is to the mouse controls, especially when playing with the simulation flight model. There were a number of changes required to address this issue, but the main one is the addition of something called a PID controller, which is basically an algorithm for generating input based on the difference between a target and current value. I won't go into the detail on this as it's a really dry subject, but just Google PID controller if you want to know more, and you should find a Wikipedia page which is really helpful. The drag equations have also had an overhaul to reduce the tendency for aircraft to accelerate too fast. There's almost certainly some more tuning that needs to happen here, but you should notice a positive change when the next demo update is released. Stall handling has also had some changes, especially in the simulation flight model. This should make aircraft feel more natural at the edge of the flight envelope. The last improvement to discuss is the ability to speed up time. This was an absolute necessity when testing the new 100 km square maps, but it's also a great feature for allowing players to quickly move between waypoints or to just explore the maps. You can control this within the game with the square bracket keys and accelerate up to 8 times normal time. Just keep in mind that it's not easy to control the aircraft at this rate. Using the mouse is probably the easiest way of controlling the aircraft at high time compression values. All up, it's been a very productive few months, and I'm really looking forward to being able to use the map editor to start building new maps and missions for the game. If you'd like to keep up with our progress, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on my next update, and give me a thumbs up if you found this interesting. If you'd like to give the game a try, then check out the link in the description to the game's Steam page, where you can play the demo for free, and don't forget to wishlist it so you'll be notified when the game is released. If you got this far, then thanks for listening, and I'll see you again next time.